What is going on in China? In China, there is a new syndrome called the white lung syndrome. It seems to be possibly connected with a huge outcrop, and they've got a huge outbreak of SARS-CoV-2. But is it? Is it something different? I bring a special guest to you tonight. I bring back to this channel Dr. Paul Cottrell, because he's going to talk to us about this. He's got a lot of background research in this topic. As you might know, he is a medical student now, a third-year medical student, and he has a PhD in finance. He's got a BS in engineering management, and he's done engineering coursework through MIT. He's quite the researcher. He researches across a broad spectrum of topics, and I think that makes him well suited for digging into the background on matters like what we're talking about today. And he's also looked at the genome, the genetic sequence for this bug, and he's been discovering a lot of things. He's got a lot to reveal to us. So, Dr. Cottrell, tell us, my friend, what is going on in China? What is white lung?
Before I talk about white lung, you forgot that I also have a master's degree at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
But, right. And that's important because I did research on the TAT protein from HIV, and so I understand about viruses and that sort of thing. And the coursework that I had at MIT was engineering. So I took 2 courses in manufacturing engineering at MIT. So okay. So with that said, white lung, what is it? Well, when it's a layman term for severe pulmonary infection that is pneumonia. Okay, what is happening in China, and what was happening in the first wave in Wuhan back in the early days of late 2019 and early 2020, and what we saw in the first wave in New York and California in 2020 was white lung. So what it is that when you do a CT scan, you have all of this fluid that's in the lung and all of this destruction because of this viral infection that it produces this pneumonia, right? And it's very obvious when you see the CT scan. It's just patches of white all over the place. So it's opaque, it makes the CT scan opaque, and you can't, the lungs aren't clear. Now you can also see it in X-rays. Now,
how does that compare to the glassy lung phenomenon they used to talk about in the earlier days, the SARS-CoV-2?
It's basically the same thing, except white lung is on presentation. There's more of it. It's the same thing.
So it's worse. So
it's worse. It's worse. So and glass opacity led to, in many cases, pulmonary fibrosis. This is going to lead to pulmonary fibrosis if the patient lives. If not, they'll have cardiac failure. So my mother, not to make this a personal statement, but my mother, she died in a nursing home. She already had cardiac problems. She already had COPD, all right? She was not well. She contracted SARS-CoV-2. 3 days later, she died. How did she die? The fluid in the lung put so much stress on her heart that she had heart failure. So this is what people are saying is happening in China. The ones that don't survive because of from white lung are having cardiac failure. All right. Now, what makes white lung? All right. What makes white lung is that they're getting an infection, a viral infection, and it moves to a severe state quickly. It spreads. The person can't their pulse ox goes down, to the low 90s or even in the 80s, and fluid starts to build up, and they're starting to have, respiratory, they're having a lot of respiratory distress. In some cases, what happens is that they'll have like a 2 or 3 day reprieve, and then they crash again, and it gets a lot worse. And the heart, because of the fluid buildup, there's pulmonary, the pulmonary system has too much pressure in it because of the fluid, and as the heart is trying to the right ventricle's pumping blood into the pulmonary artery, there's too much pressure, and it's putting too much load on the heart, and eventually the heart will give out. So so the ones that don't survive white lung, a lot of it is due to cardiac arrest, heart failure.
Yeah, let me interject.
So
Paul, let me interject.
Yep.
For the audience, Paul and I are both advocates of medical freedom, that you get to pick and choose your choice, and we don't like people being told what to do. So for people making the assumptions along that regard, I just wanted to put that out there, and that's why I started the Freedom Restoration Foundation. One of the reasons, back about 3 years ago, and Paul has supported that outfit at one time. So we do believe in that, but we also believe we need to be informed of what's coming. And there's some oddball things happening in China, and especially from the prepping standpoint and just taking care of yourself and your family. I think it's really important to get this out there so that people can see what's cooking, what might be coming our way, to have a better understanding. Even if it is coming our way, we don't know, because quite frankly, this thing, it may be because China didn't deal with the waves we dealt with earlier and stuff like that. And I'm going to ask Paul to answer that. Before I do, I just want to do my little quick advertisement here. Is we may get some lockdowns. You might be stuck in the house whether you want to be or not. So you might even with that, or all the warfare stuff going on, or an EMP attack. I would highly suggest you get long-term food storage right now. Food prices going up. You can go to prepwithgreg.com and you can get $100 off of 1 month supply. And that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 2,000 calories a day. Make you a winner. Anyway, Paul, tell us, what do you think this is could do with our about coming over here? Do you think this white lung is new? Would it be new to us? Is it something that's already burnt through our society? What's our risk here of seeing something like that, or something else coming out of China heading our way here?
Well, I want to answer that in a long form, not in a short.
Go ahead.
The long form way to answer that question is that what are the different viruses that are known in China, based on the little information that we do have. All right, we know that there are BM7. These are subvariants of Omicron. All right, so you have Omicron, BA1, BA2, BA3, but BA4, 5, right? But there are subvariants off of that BA line. Okay, so there are many subvariants. There are actually 130 variants of investigation in China. 130. All right, there are about 13 or 12 to 13 that are of concern, and there are about 4 that are of red alert. Okay, these are the red alert ones. BM7, BF7, and BA 5.2, and XBB 1.5. Now, as of right now, our understanding is that it seems as though there's also another variant of BQ1 and BQ 1.1. It seems as though BQ 1.1 and BF7 are the bulk of the white lung. Okay. There is a concern that there was a merger of Delta and one of the sub variants of Omicron that merged. Okay. That is more unique in China than anywhere else in the world. But that needs to be proven out. Okay. So, we're right at the edge of knowledge of what is going on in China, right? Because they're not sharing. This is part of the reason why they want to test the toilet water that's coming from the airlines to understand what the variants are. So, having a lot of people are saying, we don't want the Chinese to fly to these other nations because they might spread it. You need information. and sometimes you can get information in really weird ways, right? This is one of those weird ways, right? This is one of those weird ways where you can actually sample, the feces, or the toilet water that's on in the plane, and sequence it, and you would know which variant. You can compare it to the database, and you'd be able to discern what is at least on that plane. You don't know which passenger, but you know at least what's on that plane.
I find it interesting right now. The Chinese are, because of their holidays, are going on massive travel. China is really trying to crack down and punish any country that's trying to stop their people from traveling. Yet China had the same kind of travel bans on people coming into China. So I think that's two-faced for them to throw a blanket out there and call other people.
Well, the two countries that they just recently banned travel or banned visas was from Japan and South Korea. If you look at the SARS-CoV-2 Johns Hopkins database, there's an uptick in Japan by a lot, and a uptick in South Korea. We haven't seen an uptick in the United States to the same severity with XBB 1.5. That's the big one that's happening right now in the United States. About 2,500 people a week die from SARS-CoV-2 in the United States. So that's just under a 9/11 every week, if you put it in those contexts. All right, think about that. 2,500 people weekly in the United States are dying from SARS-CoV-2. Now, it's no way near like we had during the different waves. We're at a low point in this right now. But XBB 1.5 is about, I think is the dominant one in the United States. Now, in certain provinces, going back to China, in certain provinces like Hunan, which is the Wuhan, or Shanghai or Beijing, some of these epicenters, they have the number of cases in the society range anywhere from 60 to 80% of the population. Now you got to remember, that seems like, well, what's the big deal of 80% of the population? When you're talking about a city that's 20 million, all right, that's like 4 New Yorks, right? So that's a lot of people. All right.
Yeah, and every person's an incubator for something new to develop.
Right. And so it's adding to the probability. This is it's not just what we know, but it's also looking at it from a probability distribution kind of function, right? When you have more and more people that are infected, the power of numbers through mutation will lead to a variant that is going to be much worse if it's not already there. Okay. So, the question is white lung a subvariant of a subvariant? We don't have the granularity in the data to say yes or no. Now, it is interesting that, okay, travel is starting. A lot of the variants that have been detected in China, or at least what China has said they have, a lot of them are closely related to things that we already have. All right. But as their population gets infected, this thing's going to drift, and it's going to have, a different dynamic. Now, I'm concerned, and we talked about this offline here, but I'm concerned about these multiple receptors. The big ones are ACE2.
Yeah, well, take that from the bottom and explain that to the audience here about how there are, most viruses have one receptor, and you develop immunity to it.
Right. Okay, so like, for example, you might have a pathogen, and it has one or two ways that it gets into the cell. It attaches to a certain receptor on the cell. Okay, and you build up antibodies because you have been infected, and your body gets antibodies to that pathogen. All right. And so further infection or reinfection, you have antibodies to neutralize it, and you clear it pretty quickly. All right. But when you have pathogens that have affinities to more receptors, if one is blocked, all right, like for example, we have pharmaceuticals that could block a receptor, like the ACE receptor, right? We have ACE inhibitors, right? So we can block the ACE, but the thing is that when you block it, if the virus or pathogen has affinity to another receptor, it'll just go to that receptor, right? Because it has a strong affinity to ACE2, but you blocked it. So the weak affinity, it'll go to CD147 or CD209, all right, see? So, so what will happen is that as time goes on and mutations take place, and our antibodies kind of corral and help with the development of the mutation, because it's blocking a certain path, a certain topology that would lock to ACE2. And it is saying, okay, I blocked you here. All right. So it's like whack-a-mole, and it's going to go to that other receptor, and through mutation, through natural selection, it's going to gain affinity to CD147 and present different pathologies. Now, this is where the white lung, I think, is coming in, that with the severity in China, is that I think that we're seeing the beginnings of a new pathology of SARS-CoV-2 because it's tracking to other receptors, such as what we're hearing in the news. People are starting to have intestinal issues. They're starting to have swelling of the eye. They're starting to have black lung, hairy black lung. I'm sorry, hairy black tongue.
That's weird.
White lung, right? And, graying of the hair at the root very quickly in a 20-year-old, wow. Like in days, all right? So, or like a herpes-like breakout on the face, like simplex 1, the HSV-1. Wow. So the pathologies are much different than what we saw in the first wave in Wuhan, or the different waves that we saw in the United States or around the world. So I think that there's something mutating in such a way that there's different pathologies coming off of one of the subvariant Omicron lines. So so that's why people need to start realizing it's not just ACE2. And just because we had antibodies from getting the infection or getting a vaccine, right? It was designed off of a template, which is the S1 subunit. The spike protein is 2 subunits. There's a stalk and there's the top part, right? The top part is what locks into the receptors, right? The S1 subunit is the same. It's been basically the same code for most vaccines that people have been getting, right? They do have a bivalent booster now, which is a little bit more in line with Omicron, but most people haven't had that. Most people that did get a vaccine have the old S1 subunit epitope. So that the virus now, these different subvariants have mutated in such a way where there's different affinities to these other receptors than in the early days of this crisis in 2020 and 2021. Hey, Paul, so you're going to have different pathologies that start to develop. And I think we're seeing that because of the power of numbers in China. We're seeing that in real time right now. Now,
different receptors.
This would explain, let me just finish this one thought. This would explain why we're not seeing the white lung in any mass numbers in India, Italy, UK, or the United States. But that doesn't mean that we won't, because we're just saying they have BF7, we have BF7. What if what's floating around is a BF7.1.1, right? And it's just enough to have the different pathology that we haven't seen yet. So this is the concern I have, is that you know, we have to pay attention. It's not just, oh, did I have, you know, did in the United States, people are going to say, because the big wave happened in January of 2022 in number of cases, they're going to say, oh, I already had an Omicron. It won't matter, because the subvariant of this can evade the antibodies and present different pathology.
Okay. Paul, I think we should explain something for the audience. I know we've talked about this a couple of years ago, but people forget, and we got new audience members here, and not everybody understands what a receptor is and what it does. The receptor site on your cells is like a key. If the virus or some particle coming in matches that key, or the keyhole, which would be the receptor, if it's got the key that matches the keyhole, it gets in. Your cell pulls it in. It gets inside. So that's what we're trying to block. That's why we talk about ACE inhibitors. It would block coming into the ACE receptors. But what Paul and I talked about offline before we started this video, he mentioned that there are potentially 20 different receptor sites this virus can go to. That is scary. That means we're dealing with a monster that we'll be dealing with forever from the sound of it. Paul, what?
Been collaborating with some researchers and pharmaceutical companies in Europe, and they do clinical research in India. They know for sure that those 20 receptors are activated by SARS-CoV-2. For sure. They're all of different affinities. They're all of and they're activating different things. And this is part of the reason why. This is another thing that people don't understand. When you get SARS-CoV-2, you don't get rid of it. It stays in a reservoir. It stays in the adipose tissue, naive macrophages that are around adipose tissue. It stays in the lung. It not the lung. Stays in the liver, and it stays in the colon. So it can reactivate. It can reactivate.
Is this
one? Again?
Is this one?
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why long COVID has happened. Oh. So there's this thing this goes into a latent phase. All right, and it can go dormant, and then it can be reactivated, right? And not only that, you could be latent and then get infected by a different variant, and then because you go into an inflammatory response, you're hit with two, and when you're hit with two, then it's adding to the probability of a merger. This is part of the reason why the mergers are happening. So you get an infection, let's say Delta, you clear Delta, it's in your colon, all right? Then you get Omicron, all right? And, a year later or whatever, and there's an inflamed response. It reactivates Delta, all right? And now you have cells that have both of them in there, and then they merge. So this is part of the reason why long COVID is it's an umbrella term trying to capture a lot of different things that are happening, right? But from the layman point of view, I would say that long COVID is symptoms that are post a COVID infection, or the COVID disease, which is caused by SARS-CoV-2, and it's not healing. You're either having sleep disorders, tachycardia, brain fog, problems with exercising because of the you're not transferring your oxygen, what you breathe in, to through your alveolar sacs in the lung, and that transfer isn't taking place because there's a lot of fibrosis, right? So people that had a problem with their lung, such as white lung or the glass opacity, have this problem. People are having problems with their kidney or endocrine issues. That their endocrine system is out of whack. So there's a lot of there's a changing of the immune system. In some cases, there's actually an overreaction of the immune system. So it would be classified as kind of an autoimmune kind of disorder, kind of like GBS or Epstein-Barr, something like that, where it's attacking nerves. So there's a lot of different things that can be captured under long COVID. So people need to realize that that's why it's not, I'm a proponent of, like you said, choice, right? Should you choose for a vaccine or not? Okay, that should be your choice based on your risk assessment. The government should not tell you. But the thing that these are the facts, though. The facts are that, both can harm, right? Whatever. There's no good path. Both can harm. An inoculation can harm, and so can the natural infection harm. It gets even stranger, Greg, all right? It's not just white lung. It is known, if you look at the CDC data, in 2019 to 2022, cancers are up by 10% in the United States. Now, people would say, well, that's because of lack of screening in 2020 and maybe 2021. No, we know that there are proteins within that 30,000 nucleotide genome of SARS-CoV-2. And I'll tell you the proteins. It's NSP5 and 8, and the E protein are just 3 of many that actually are tumor suppressors. Tumor suppressor inhibitors. Follow what I'm saying here. We have tumor suppressor genes fighting cancer. SARS-CoV-2 turns those off. Right. So this is the reason why we're starting to hear in the news now.
That's crazy.
Stage 3 and stage 4 cancers popping up in all types of cohorts, the elderly and the young. So you can't win. It's almost like we've been painted into a corner, or we've been checkmated in chess, right? Whatever metaphor you want to use, but there's no good solution to this. If you don't have good antibodies, you're going to get SARS-CoV-2. If you get SARS-CoV-2, if you survive white lung, and you make it through long COVID, you may get cancer. So it's all about probabilities. It's not like this is a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get cancer, but your risk profile is increased. It's the same thing. It's not guaranteed to get long COVID, but your risk to get long COVID increases if you get COVID, right? So, the people need to start waking up. Are starting to wake up, and then how do you prepare for something like this? In a lot of ways you can, other than just boost up your immune system the best that you can, and eat properly, and exercise, and have proper mental health, and sleep is a lot of American, I think a lot of adults in general have too much stress and anxiety, so their sleep patterns are very good. So the bottom line here is that something different is happening in China. The question is what? We don't have an answer to that. There are hypotheses. One hypothesis is that there is a subvariant mutation that falls in line with this different receptor affinity, leading to different pathology, such as this intestinal infection, right? Or the more severe white lung. Another possible hypothesis is that their vaccine was crap, and they didn't have any antibodies, or very, very poor antibodies. So now they're getting the big wave, right? And they're getting all the mutations, all that backlog of mutations going through the society. But if you listen to the stories that are going on in China, with the crematoriums, and thousands of people are dying, a day in these provinces, that are tied to the SARS-CoV-2 infection. It's concerning. It kind of almost reminds me of what was happening in India when they had their big wave, high deaths, the crash of the medical system, lack of oxygen tanks. Same thing you're hearing in China, the crash of the medical system, lack of oxygen tanks, and so maybe it's just their antibodies and we'll be okay. We don't know. We don't know. That's the problem. We don't know. It's very, very, anyone that has been following me for the last 3 years, will when they type in their little comments in a video or whatever, a lot of them say, Greg, that this seems like Wuhan all over again. There's a lot of unknown. It's almost like we're walking on eggshells and waiting for the wave to hit. It's like anyone that's been in a big storm with a hurricane or whatever. You've been through some hurricanes. It's coming. It's all nice and quiet outside. Actually, the birds are flying around. You see the sun. But in 48 hours, it could be total devastation. That is kind of like where we're at right now. A lot of people are feeling that, this feels, and it rhymes with 2020, the early 2020.
It sounds.
We may be lucky. We may be lucky, and we don't see the white lung. We don't have the high death rate, and and the antibodies that are in our population through natural infection or through the vaccine are good enough. I hope that's the case, but it is possible that something new is brewing in China. We just don't know yet. That's the problem. And my bellwether has been India since I discovered this new wave in China with the white lung and these other pathologies that are presenting themselves. Because these other pathologies were not there during Wuhan, and they were not there for our waves when we went through this crisis. These are new pathologies. All right. So that's a data point to suggest something's different. What is it? What is it? It's possible, Greg, it's possible that it's a twofer where it's SARS-CoV-2, they're testing positive, but there's another virus that's helping it so long that we're not detecting because we're so focused on the antigen of some subvariant of Omicron and the PCR for it, and not focusing on something new, right? So there is this, there's been some research going all the way back to about 2012, suggesting that there's going to be a intestinal virus, enterovirus, that with a certain mutation ends up becoming respiratory, attacking children. Okay, the research out there that I saw, the earliest research that I saw of this was in 2012. There was a big wave of additional research around 2015 of this. It just so happens to coincide with that last simulation that Bill Gates did. That contagion, what was it? I forgot the name of it. It's not Event 201. It's the other one. Contagion. I don't know what it is, but
they just did another simulation. They just did another.
Well, the thing is that they were predicting that it was going to happen in 2025, the simulation. All right, but we're seeing the manifestations of some of the pathology already in China. So, but the thing is it's happening to 20-year-olds all the way up to 80-year-olds, right? It's not focused on children and neonates. While this research that was being conducted in 2012 about this mutation, and in 2015 was more focused on the younger population, the really young population. So we're not seeing that dynamic. It's different, but there is an intestinal issue going on here. So what is it? And will it just clear? Maybe it's it's bad, but it's a fast wave. It hits, and it takes a lot of people out, but then it kind of echoes away? Or is there going to be a wave after another wave? If it is a subvariant of Omicron, then it's adding to the probability that this will be that it will have some echoing of additional waves because of the multiple receptors.
Paul, where are most of the people of China traveling to? I mean, I'm already wondering where's the next place if this is going to start spreading and we're going to see similar symptoms or related symptoms in other locations. Where would you expect us to look to see it pop up first?
I was expecting it to show up in India first, or some port, air kind of port, like Italy, or like your major hubs, Italy, maybe Germany, UK, United States, Australia, Japan, Brazil. I would say those would be the big ones. All right. My biggest bellwether is India, because they have a big population. They have a lot of people that are poor. So the healthcare isn't per capita that very good. They probably have waning antibodies, right? And so I think that because of population size and their particular dynamics in healthcare will manifest what's happening in China. It'd be more of a proxy to understand what's going on in China than anywhere else in the world. Now, if we look at, that's not what's happening. When we look at the data, it's South Korea, Japan that are getting hit right now. All right. The United States has this XBB, but it's not really that bad compared to what's going on in China. So it's almost a nothing burger at this moment, right? But South America, in some of the countries like Peru and some of these, Argentina, they're starting to get more cases. So what we thought would probably be happening because of just high travel, because of economic conductivity, it's not happening. It's happening in a different way. It's South America. It's brewing in South America. It's brewing in Japan. It's brewing in South Korea. It probably is in North Korea. We just don't know because they're close society. Who knows what's going on in Russia? Everything's, who knows? Radio silence, right? So, but I still, because of some of the unique dynamics of India and their society and population density, I've been looking at that. I've been expecting to start hearing the wave hit in India this week. It doesn't seem to be catching. I don't know why. It could, is there something unique, where it's, that there, some sort of ethnic profile that is unique to the Chinese that but who knows? But it could be as simple as that these other countries have better antibodies and they're, they'll get a wave, but it won't be as bad. We just don't know. But a lot of patients that are in the hospitals in China, this is the scary part. 20% of the hospitalizations, when they can get into the hospital because it's packed, right? 20% are white lung. That's a lot. That's a lot. All right. And that will lead to either permanent, pulmonary fibrosis, Longcovid, or cardiac failure, right? So these, you get white lung, that's like, it's almost a death sentence. It's almost like permanent problem if you live, right? So, there's a lot of data points out there to suggest be on the lookout, have vigilance, be alert. Don't think that, oh, it's over there. It's the same mindset in the early days of Wuhan, when it was just happening in Wuhan. Everyone was saying, it's not going to happen here. I remember being on Doug Hageman's show. He was one of the first guys I went on to talk about this, right? This was probably in January and early February. Late January, early February, when I was on his show. And I have a lot of little side stories that I should write a book about. So when we finished the show, all right, he asks me, well, I think it was either his sister and or his wife, something like that. And they were going to be going on a cruise that they've been planning for a month or so. And he asked me, should they go on the cruise? They spent all this money and it's not refundable and blah, blah, blah. And I said, are you crazy? You got to remember, at that time, they had people on cruise ships that were contracting SARS-CoV-2, and no one wanted them to dock anymore. Remember those? That? And then eventually they docked into California. Well, that was at that time, right? When we had this conversation. And I was like going, are you nuts? You're just asking for a problem. So, I have 1,000 of those kinds of stories behind the scenes of these little tidbits. But I thought that he did have his sister or wife go on the cruise. I didn't check back. I don't know. So, but the bottom line is this: people need to understand that what is happening in China affects us, even if we don't get a white lung wave, which I think we will. But even if we're lucky and we don't get it, because it's all about probability, it's still going to disrupt the supply chain. It's still going to cause perturbations geopolitically, right? And miscalculation. And
that's the better side of the spectrum. You can expect that we are going to get disruptions in the supply chain. It is going to have geopolitical ripples. The bad side is, what if it incubated there, they get better, they recover, and then it spreads, and the West is on their knees, and then they hit Taiwan. That's exactly. What if they use the ultimate bioweapon and launch an attack on the rest of the world, or at least
I totally agree with you. I think that's part of the reason why they opened up.
That's what I've been wondering.
They're saying that it's the white paper. They're saying it's the white paper revolution, right? Right. Well, that's not, or protest or whatever they call it. These incidences were happening in October. They opened up in December. They were having these cases already in October. All right. So they kind of like used the white paper revolution to say, okay, we'll listen to you because we love you. And okay, it spreads. They know that they're going to have problems, but they also know that this is probably going to abate after 4 to 6 weeks, right? And then they have strong antibodies, the ones that survive. They have strong antibodies against what they have. While the rest of the world, this propagates all the way into the third quarter of 2023. And certain regions are going to be sicker than others, and it could very well be a strategic move to move into Taiwan, thinking that the United States has a cold, right? They're weak, they're weakened. So, and this could be a calculated move by President Xi. So I agree with you that we may be seeing the beginnings of the Taiwan War right now because of this.
So this could be an opening act in a world war, basically, or another act in a world war. We may already be in a world war.
Right. I think we've been in. I think we're in a,
since 2020.
if you look at it from like a historian point of view, there are like two different types of historians. I'm broad brushing this. There's two different types of historians. There's the delineation type historian, where World War I ended. There was a hiatus, and then World War II starts, and then World War II ends, and then there's the Cold War. And then there's the other type of historian where this is a continuum.
Yes, very much. That's where
I'm. And this whole thing is a continuum of a larger conflict.
like bones connected to the hip bone.
Yeah. Maybe it goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. I don't know, but it helps to delineate when you're trying to focus on a particular era of scholarship and to teach that era to students. It's hard to say, it's hard to apply the continuum theory of history versus the delineation of history.
Oh yeah.
It's just easier to package. It's easier to teach it.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I think that
the Germans. I mean, there definitely is these pieces and elements.
Yeah, well, I have always thought from the very beginning of 2020 that this crisis, SARS-CoV-2 crisis, will lead to a conflict in the Pacific with Taiwan. So, and the PLA white papers, they state this. They state that they want Taiwan in 2024. It's not like this is like pie in the sky kind of thoughts, right? This is what the CCP is echoing, and our naval academies are studying, and how do you fight this, and it's not an accident that we're starting to hear that there is a decoupling of the supply chain between China and the United States. That and that decoupling helps both of us. It helps them because we're going to obviously sanction them when the escalation happens, right? And we also want to hedge our bet and move supply chains either internally or somewhere else in the world, like India, where we could still have our products.
Yeah, in the meantime, they will retool their supply chains for war fighting.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Right. But the thing is that there's certain technologies that I think that we still have a competitive advantage that they don't have. So
definitely,
Taiwan, some of the Taiwan companies are starting to build fabs in I think it was Arizona and in Oregon. So for the chips, for certain types of chips. So there's a strategy in the United States that if Taiwan flares up, it goes hot, all right, that perhaps the United States will not do a full war engagement with China, but will do something called broken nest. And broken nest is basically you burn down Taiwan, you destroy the chips, but you need about a 3 to 5 year window to build fab facilities somewhere else, right? Well, they started this about a year ago. All right, they're still 2 years away or 3 years away before of any significant production, and not have quality problems. So our electronic devices may be in low supply, high demand when this flare up happens because there's not enough fab facilities. So, but the United States probably will just burn it down and not, because this thing's probably going to inch towards tactical nukes. I was surprised actually the tactical nukes weren't used in Ukraine. I was thinking it was going to happen. And I was like, I'm surprised that Putin didn't do it.
It's not over yet.
No, well, that's true. But I mean, so there was,
I don't think he wants to, but what would he? The question is, will he allow the loss of Crimea? I think that's going to be the real test, the litmus test. If he allows Crimea, well, he may not lose anything. He might wind up taking Ukraine. But if he winds up on the losing side and Crimea goes, what's he going to do? How's he going to respond? I think that's the.
I think he's trying to find an off ramp. I think he's trying to find a way to politically survive, literally and figuratively.
It's always about political survival in the end.
And he wants an off ramp to de-escalate this, and still have save face. There's a saving face thing that needs to happen with the Russians. He's ailing. There's some rumors that he has cancer. Maybe he does. He doesn't. Maybe he has Parkinson's. We don't know. But it seems as though he's ailing. All right. So, and he's already. I think he turned 70. Didn't he just turn 70? So so there may be a little coup going on, and maybe he doesn't have control of the military as much as we think he does.
I think he does. He really isolated his command and control network of people and organizations, and he's really got himself set up. Problem is, if he goes, it's going to be hard for him to rebuild a coalition. Probably, I could be wrong.
Yeah, but we thought that the Russians were so much better in military preparation. Can we use that as a proxy to assume that the Chinese aren't that strong?
Maybe, maybe not. And it could be that Russia hasn't played their A game yet. Some people think they're saving their A game for NATO. Like they're not putting their best jets at risk over there. And why is that? Are they saving them for a fight with us? I mean,
I don't think they can procure the parts if they need replacements.
That may be it too. But there are some things they're just not putting at risk. There's a lot of questions about what's really happening there. And you get a lot of people that tell you they got the answer. We got the answer. It's this, but it doesn't agree with this guy's got the answer, and it's that. And then they're both experts and know everything there is to be known, but they don't come anywhere. Well, it's just like
it's so funny to watch. It's so funny to watch some of these talking heads, like you're talking about, that are working in the United States.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. And they're part of Harvard, and they're part of the Brookings Institute and the Hoover Institute, and CSIS and the Trilateral, and it is. They almost always get it wrong. They almost always. I mean, they either overshoot it or undershoot it.
Yes, exactly. That's why it's safe to admit you don't know and speculate about what could be. What are the potential? That's where I try to come across.
Yeah, but we could get that just from we might as well just start an organization, call it, I don't know, the Paul Gregg Foundation or whatever, or the Institute of whatever. And we just go to Congress or go to be our own think tank and just say, this is what's going to happen in China. This is what's going to happen in Russia. And it's going to be just as accurate, if not more accurate, than anything that the quote regional experts could say.
Well, hey, there's that old adage about trained monkeys, that monkeys do better than the analysts and the experts, because monkeys can only be wrong half the time. But if it's a binary yes or no, whereas these analysts, they get into a group think and a herd mentality, and they don't want to get it outside of the group think, because then they look bad within their organizations. But usually the group think is all wrong to start with. So that's where they miss it over and over a lot of times. So if you can be outside of group think, just rolling dice, you're going to do better.
But what was interesting, seeing the arc of my education in medicine. The first year, MS1, the first year when it was dealing with SARS-CoV-2, it was like the Zoonoid theory. Vaccines are great, and it must have been natural out of the bat cave, right? But as things progressed,
we always had issues with those stories.
Right, and at the end of MS2, we were dealing with it was heavy in immunology, heavy in molecular biology and microbiology. So dealing with pathogens, all types, tick type pathogens, amoebas, viruses, bacteria. And we had a couple lectures about, they framed it as bioterrorism, all right? That's how they framed it. But what it really is weapon development, right? So, it's, it was interesting to see how that it switched, that they're actually saying, there's these things that people do in the world that you have to, have these labs understand these pathogens, build a shield,
yeah,
build swords, build swords and shields for it. So, yeah.
Paul and I are going to do another video, everyone, on my Rumble channel. I've got a Rumble channel, Rumble Swivel Head News, and we're going to do another video soon talking more about the details of how some of these things come to be. It's not really what we want. It won't fly on this platform.
Right. No, but but the point I was making is that how even institutions that are teaching the new crop of doctors, they're starting to switch their thinking. It's slow. It's like a big, gigantic, titanic boat to turn around, But they're, the people are starting to wise up. Unfortunately, you still have doctors out there that are not new, but they're of the older generation. That some of them are awake, but some of them are still towing the line. Thinking that everything is copacetic. This is nothing to worry about, and that myocarditis isn't a big thing, and the athletes dropping dead isn't a big thing, and like for example, let's get into some pathology here. So we saw some videos recently of some basketball players dropping while they were playing on the court. Some football players, some student athletes, having heart attacks on the field or whatever. One of the mechanisms of this, because of CD147, which is one of the receptors, we have, with our heart, we have the aorta, right? And the aorta is arched. So at the very apex of the aorta are these cells that can sense the pressure that the left ventricle is pushing through the aorta when the aortic valve is open, right? So it can sense the pressure. It's called a baroreceptor. So it has a baroreceptor, a pressure receptor that sends a signal to the medulla, which is in the brainstem. So you have the pons, and right underneath the pons is the medulla and the brainstem. So there's a nucleus there that gets an afferent signal from the aorta baroreceptor cells that happen to have the CD147 receptor. So if you have a high concentration of spike protein, you can activate these CD147 receptors and disrupt and create inflammation that disrupts the signal. Now, this is important because we also have another baroreceptor in our carotid on both sides. So the carotid baroreceptor will send also an afferent signal to the medulla. The carotid is off of the cranial nerve 9. The aortic baroreceptor is off of cranial nerve 10. Right? They go to the medulla, and the medulla process and will send back to the nodes in the heart for signaling for if you want to go bradycardia or tachycardia, right? And the contraction, right? So it signals the SA node and the AV node. And so if those baroreceptors are disrupted through the inflammation from activating the CD147 through the spike protein, right? Then the afferent signals from cranial nerve 9 and 10 gets disrupted. The processing in the medulla is not correct, and then sends a signal through the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is through an efferent of cranial nerve 10. And if that's not correct, it could accelerate the heart. One of the signs of Longcovid is tachycardia.
I'm having a problem with
Problems with cranial nerve 10.
I'm having
Right?
some issues.
So I think what's happening with these student athletes is that they have an inflammatory response that has taken place because an overabundance of S protein, spike protein, and activating CD147 and causing havoc with the baroreceptors. And then the electrical signaling is not right, and then they go into AFib, and they're literally, their heart is not working right. And if you go into AFib, you can throw a clot, you can have a stroke, or the heart could just stop, right? So I think this is what's happening or it's one of the mechanisms. So there's it's not just everyone's been focused on myocarditis. So in the heart, there are layers. There's endocardium, there's the myocardium, which is the center layer, and then there's the pericardium, all right, the outer layer, right? So you can have pericarditis, the outer part of the the heart, right? And the sac. There's a sac that the heart's in a kind of a fluid to prevent friction. So you can have inflammation around the heart, right? And then you can have inflammation inside the muscle, the myocardium, or you can have inflammation in the inner tissue of the heart, the endocardium, or inflammation of, let's say, some of the valves, and it leads to murmurs and whatnot. And then you have this other process where you can have electrical signaling problems. So one can be negative for myocarditis, but still get AFib because of the signaling problem through the medulla. So.
Wow. So we probably ought to wrap this up. Like I said, for the listening audience, Paul and I will probably do another video talking about things that need to be on another platform. So I'm hoping we'll be on Rumble, maybe next week. We'll see. But Paul, what would you recommend people do just in society? What do you recommend for people to brace themselves to prepare for what's coming? What's your recommendation?
Well, I think it starts with realizing there is a problem. The first step is there's a problem. Now, when there are problems, the next step is how severe is the problem? Well, there's a big unknown. There's a lot of things that are happening in China that are new, that have that they rhyme with what was happening in 2020, but they're new. And I mentioned some of those pathologies. So what someone can do is realize, okay, I have a problem, and it is about probability. All right. At this moment in time, ones that are living in the United States, we have a decent number of titers, different types of antibodies that are in the population that should keep this at bay and prevent severe infection. It's not going to prevent infection. It's going to slow down, mitigate some of the severity of it. So keep that in mind. It's you're not going to be able to just neutralize yourself and not get SARS-CoV-2. Eventually, you're going to get SARS-CoV-2. So realize that. And the idea is that if you have a weakened immune system, if you aren't getting proper exercise and diet and sleep, then you have a weakened immune system. So it's all about boosting up your immune system, right? It's very simple. You look at people that are sick all the time, you know, a lot of times they're not eating right, they're not sleeping right, you know, they're not exercising, right? You know, poor lifestyle habits and poor supplementation in nutrition. So, you know, there's a holistic approach to this. Realize there's a problem, get some sleep, you know, even though, you know, you listen to Dr. Paul Cottrell and it scares the hell out of you. You don't want to sleep. but, you know, and, you know, try to have, you know, mental health, I think, is also another one. You know, I think mental health is starting to become a major issue in the United States, and it needs to, you know, we need to address those issues. You know, realize that, take a survey of your life and say, okay, I am weak in these areas and I'm strong in these areas, and strengthen the areas that you're weak on. If you're weak on, you know, doing regular exercising, then you need to bump it up a little bit. If you're weak on dietary habits, improve your dietary habits. If you're weak on improving supplementation and nutrition, boost that up. There's tons of articles on the internet or people, you know, talking about how to boost up your immune system and you know, live a more healthy existence. I think that is the best that you can do when we weather the storm. There's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet that's going to stop this from happening to you and your family. All right. Even if you had the vaccine, you know, because it's only going to mitigate. It's not going to prevent. So, my recommendation is to say, boost up your immune system. Your immune system can be boosted up in many different ways, right? Like I said, you know, sleep is a big one, you know, but another one is to say, you know, certain types of supplements are more prone to improving your immune system, you know, like the turmerics, like ashwagandha. Ashwagandha controls your blood glucose levels. A lot of people have a very high A1C count, right? They have high glucose count. So take ashwagandha, you know, on a regular basis. Take turmerics. Let's bring down that inflammation. If you're chronically inflamed, if you're chronically having aches and chronically having, you know, problems, your immune system is weakened. One, when you're chronically inflamed and in pain, you probably have high cortisol levels. When you have high cortisol levels, that's immunosuppressant when it's chronic, right? So you don't want it, you know, you want to have, there's two types of cytokines. There's pro-inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory cytokines. So you want to promote anti-cytokine kind of stuff to kind of bring down that inflammation, that pro-inflammatory response. You want to bring that down. So you know, taking the ashwagandhas and taking the turmerics, resveratrol is a strong antioxidant. You know, when you are stressed, when you're, you know, not feeling well or whatever, you have reactive oxygen species that are produced. When you have reactive oxygen species that are produced, it ends up creating cellular damage, right? And that cellular damage could end up being permanent necrosis, right? There's reversible and irreversible necrosis. So if you don't control that, if your body is over saturated with this reactive oxygen species, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a weakening of your body, and the cells are going to be damaged. So you want to soak that up with strong antioxidants. Resveratrol is one. C60 is another one that soaks up that stuff. Vitamin C is also a antioxidant, but the problem is that molecule, it has a 5-sided chain. Well, it can only neutralize one reactive oxygen species. For every one molecule of vitamin C, you can only, you know, deactivate one reactive oxygen. So, you know, when you go with compounds like C60, because it's a buckyball, you know, it has 60 carbons, it will soak up this stuff at a much higher rate. It's much more potent. So that brings it down. And when you do that, you are improving your mitochondrial health. You need ATP. You need ATP. That it's the energy source of your body.
Right.
People age because they had lower ATP. It's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but well, you need that for your immune system. So if you already are low on your ATP because you've been inflamed all the time with these reactive oxygen species, you can't fight infections. So you need so you want to bring down the inflammation. You want to soak up the reactive oxygen species by taking strong antioxidants like C60. And another pillar of this is neutralizing the pathogens, and there are many ways to do that. There are natural herbs that people can take, like rosemary. Thieves' oil is what was used during the Black Plague, that some of those compounds are antiviral, but also things that can neutralize pathogens, such as nanocells. So, thinking in those terms, neutralize pathogens, bring down inflammation, control your blood glucose levels, soak up reactive oxygen species with strong antioxidants. That will, if you do that, that is like a three-pronged approach to boosting up your immune system. And what you'll notice is that even if you didn't get SARS-CoV-2, you'll start reducing that chronic problem that you have, right? And your body will start to heal. You'll start to see, wow, I'm actually got more energy. I feel younger. And when you have more energy, you're moving around more. When you're moving around more, you're reducing adipose tissue. When you're moving around more, you're probably having, more muscle mass, right? So when that is all happening, you're actually slowing down the aging process, right? I this year I'll be turning 51. All right, 51. All right, so a lot of people at age 51 couldn't get through medical school, right? This is because for many, many, many years, I've been taking high doses of antioxidants, but going all the way back to age 16. So, there's a compound effect. You can't just do this and just say, okay, I'm going to do it for 2 weeks and everything's going to be hunky-dory. It doesn't work like that. There's a compound effect. You do it month after month, year after year, and you'll start seeing your body is healing. Your body is healing. That's how you approach what I'm saying is that you can take things from geriatric medicine and some of the research that came out of anti-aging and apply it to the crisis that we're in right now. And that's the big takeaway, that some of the key components of anti-aging that helps to boost up your immune system will help you fare better and reduce the probability of severe infection as you go through this crisis. That's the big takeaway.
That's like your holistic history. You have a holistic chemistry. You have a holistic biology. Your body is a system of systems, and that to a person that thinks in terms of systems engineering, that's what makes sense. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point that you're making, because a lot of people are going like, what's the one thing that's the most important that I should get? And it's like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's like you have to hit it in a multi-pronged approach. And because of that synergistic effect, special things happen. This is part of the reason why, when people do research on this stuff, it's hard to pinpoint individual benefit when they're only looking at vitamin C, or only looking at zinc, or only looking at D3. But when they're looking at D3 and K2 and reducing, their lipid profile, it changes the whole dynamic of plaque buildup. It reduces plaque, actually, when you do that. So
in your arteries.
Yeah. So, like, for example,
I know K2 D3 by itself could cause it to build up, but K2 is supposed to reduce.
All right. So there was a research study that used metformin, D3, and K2 and K7. All right. What they found when they were doing Doppler on the carotid. So you can do like an ultrasound Doppler of the carotid and determine what the blockage is. Right. So individuals that had more than 50% blockage were in this trial. And they found that after, I think, I want to say after 3 or 6 months, that it went down to 25% blockage. It actually reduced.
50?
Right. From 50% blockage to 25.
Wow.
And I believe it was either 3 months or 6 months. I don't remember the duration.
K7 and metformin.
Metformin, right. Well, why is this working? All right. It's working because the metformin is controlling your blood glucose levels. Right. So that's causing that causes an inflammatory response. And the D3 and the K2 MK7 is reducing the amount of calcium that is being deposited in the plaque. And right. But if you also mix it with a strong antioxidant, you're reducing the LDL being oxidized and creating foam cells that lead to further plaque. So if someone wanted to reduce cardiovascular disease, all you got to do is take D3, K2, MK7, C60, and ashwagandha. You take that every day, and you don't eat McDonald's every day, right? But have a well-balanced diet, some exercise and part of your and you will fare a lot better versus someone that's not, because you're neutralizing that the potentiality of the LDL oxidizing. You're reducing the blood glucose level because you have the ashwagandha. It acts like metformin. All right. It has a similar kind of dynamic. And the D3 K2 has been found to reduce calcium depositing. So, right there, what we just went over could save someone's life if they listened and followed that through.
That's just true in general. That has nothing to do with the bug going around, but that can definitely help person resist the bug, I suppose. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's good advice. That's some of the best advice I've heard together in one spot in a long time. I've heard people talk about various pieces of this in isolation. So, Paul, I really appreciate that. I do think we need to go now. We've been on about an hour and a half, and so if we want to get people to watch this, we got to keep it under 2 hours. So, Paul, I really appreciate it. Let's do this again and not wait 2 years this time. Maybe next week. I'd like to get into some other aspects on another platform on my Rumble channel, my Swivelhead Rumble channel. Paul, thank you very much. I'm going to end the video now. Everyone, I want to thank y'all for watching. Stay tuned. We'll cover some other aspects of this down the road. So subscribe to my channels and subscribe to Paul's channel too. I'll put a link to his channel below. So thank you, folks, and Greg.